In this video, we're going to cover Maya LT interface for game environment modeling. Maya LT is an extremely complex piece of software, and in order to use Maya LT to its full capacity, you simply won't have time to master everything. You can use Maya to create characters, to create environments and props. You can UV what you model. You can create complex shaders and texture your geometry. You can use Maya for animation, to rig characters, to create blend shapes, to paint weights. So the extent of using Maya goes well beyond game environment modeling. And because of all this that you can do with Maya, it becomes very difficult to learn it for a complete beginner. But in our case, all we are concerned is using Maya for game environment modeling. So in this video, we'll cover Maya LT interface as it has to do of modeling game environments. When you first launch Maya, you will have What's New Highlight Settings window pop up. This will highlight new features that are available in the current version of Maya. And you can see some of them right here in the interface. You can disable this. And you can also disable showing this at startup. So this will remove this window from popping up every time you launch Maya. Let's go ahead and close this window. And you can disable or enable this window pop-up by going to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Preferences, and under Interface, you see a menu option for Highlight What's New. And you can enable and disable these two options from here. The first interface option you should know about is the menu set. You'll find them here at the top left. If you left click, you'll have a drop-down menu to choose what you want to use Maya for: modeling, rigging, animation, shading, or you can customize. For game environment modeling, we want to choose modeling. Depending on which option you choose, the first 7 drop-down menus are going to stay exactly the same, but the rest will change. So if we choose animation, the drop-down menus will change to focus on animation. And we'll be using all of these drop-down menus to access modeling tools. So make sure you have Maya set to modeling. Next important interface option menu is the status line and can be found here. Most of the items here we won't use that much in the beginning, except for one of the most important functions in game environment modeling, and that is snapping options. You always want to work on the grid, and you want to be able to snap to the grid lines and to other objects, especially if you're creating modular geometry, such as architecture of walls, windows, doors, stairs, anything that has to be snapped together. You will find the snapping options right here. You have snap to grid, to curves, to points, and so on. Most of the time we won't be coming up here to enable them. We'll use a hotkey. But it's important to note that these options are available here, and you can turn on and off a variety of snapping options which you will use a lot. Right below the status line, we have the shelf right here. These are the most commonly used functions that you can get access to without going up into the menu and using the drop-down menu. So for example, under polygons, we have a way to create primitive shapes. So we can left click and create that object in the scene. Or we can use some other options, such as mirror geometry, smooth, or any other function that is also available in the drop-down menu. Using the shelf speeds up your workflow. So instead of coming up to create a cube by going to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cube, you simply access it through the shelf. And you have standard shelves that come with Maya. And by switching between all of these, this gives you commonly used functions for animation, shading, rigging, sculpting, and so on. As you continue working, you'll find that there are a set of functions that you constantly use by coming up to the menu. And you can place these, any of these, into your shelf. So instead of coming up using the drop-down menu, you'll have access by left-clicking on any of these icons. You can also create custom shelves specifically for what you're working on. We will cover how to create a custom shelf and how to add items to that shelf as we continue on with the series. So shelves are one of the most commonly used menus, which greatly speed up your workflow. Next big item in the interface is, of course, the viewport. Upon launching Maya, you will see the perspective viewport. To switch and be able to see orthographic viewports or the 2x2 split, simply hit the spacebar key as you hover your mouse inside the perspective viewport. Spacebar is the hotkey to switch between maximized viewport and 2x2 split. The way this works is when you hover your mouse over any viewport, Maya knows that that viewport is being currently selected. You don't have to press any key other than hovering the mouse over that viewport and hit the spacebar key. It will maximize that viewport where your mouse cursor is. And this is an extremely fast workflow of switching between maximized viewport and restored viewport. We will cover how to navigate inside each viewport in another video. Each viewport will have a panel option of drop-down menus of how you want to view that viewport, as well as Viewport Panel toolbar. In here, you'll find another set of options to view your viewport in a specific way. We will be using some of these options a lot, such as the ability to switch to wireframe, to shaded view, wireframe on shaded, and a few other options that we will cover on case-by-case basis when we need them. You have the same panel toolbar and drop-down menus for perspective viewport as well as any other orthographic viewports. There is a hotkey which enables you to cycle panel viewport icons. If you press Ctrl-Shift-M, this will turn on and off the panel toolbar. This shortcut is useful for maximizing your workspace. Next interface option menu is the channel box and attribute editor. You will find them both right here on the right hand side. Currently we have the channel box open, and if you press Ctrl-A, this will expand it to attribute editor. You can also left click on these tabs to switch between channel box and attribute editor. Essentially, channel box is the compact view and attribute editor is the expanded view. Most of the time we'll use the channel box, and from time to time we'll jump over to the attribute editor to go more into depth. With the channel box and attribute editor allows you to edit and adjust values for selected objects inside your scene. You can also adjust and tweak various functions used inside Maya. So to give you an example, we already have this cube created inside the perspective viewport. Once I select this cube inside the channel box, we'll have the name of the object. We'll be able to move, rotate, or scale this object. And if we scroll down, we have an input box, which allows us to define width, height, and depth, as well as subdivisions for that cube. So we could just key in values and resize this cube, or we can input manually the values for translate, rotate, and scale. Depending on whichever object you have selected, you'll have a different set of channel box menu options. Another option that you will use the channel box or the attribute editor for is, let's say we took this cube and we extruded. Don't worry exactly what I'm doing, I just want to show you an option. So once we did an extrude function on this object, I'm going to select this object, go into the channel box. If we scroll down, inside the inputs tab, we have an extrude option, and we can go ahead and change some of these values of how we want to extrude and adjust manually after the extrusion already been performed. So the channel box is going to be extremely useful for adjusting values and tweaking that object. And by switching over to the attribute editor, this gives us more in-depth and expanded view of the channel box. But to start with, the channel box is going to be enough for most of the modeling functions. Let's go ahead and deselect this object. Right below the channel box, we have Display Layers panel right here. With Display Layers, we can take any object that's inside the viewport, place it on a layer, and then hide that layer and those objects from view. So if you have a large scene or multiple objects, you would just place those objects on layers and then hide those layers to get rid of the cluttered objects inside your viewport. It's a great way to organize your scene. To quickly show you how this works, you would select an object, come over and create a new layer, and with the object selected, right click and add selected objects. And then you can cycle the visibility of that object on and off. And you can place multiple objects into a layer, and for better organization, you would rename this layer. Let's go ahead and right click and remove this layer. Delete it. There's also a tab for animation layers, and we will not be using animation layers. Right underneath the perspective viewport and display layers, we have animation controls. This includes playback controls, range slider, and time slider. These have to do with previewing and displaying animation, and we will not be using any of these controls, so we can go ahead and maximize our working space by turning these off. To do this, go up to Display, UI Elements, and uncheck Time Slider, and uncheck Range Slider. Next to interface menu panels are Mel Command Line. This is used for scripting, and a script editor line. And actually we can see more what's going on with the script editor by opening up the script editor menu. This is more advanced, and in the beginning you won't be using the script editor or the scripting language inside Maya. So we could turn these off, but we are going to leave them on because when you get more advanced, you may end up using them. So we're going to leave them here for now. And right below that we have Helpline, which displays short help tips for various Maya tools. So when you select an object, or when you're about to use one of the functions for modeling, this could give you brief tips of what you could do and what buttons you could press. On the bottom left hand side, you have quick layout menu options. This will configure your Maya viewport to display perspective, a 2x2 configuration, and a few others, such as the outline and perspective viewport, animation graph. So these are quick selections to change viewport configurations in Maya. These are useful, but most of the time I use the spacebar hotkey to go between orthographic and the perspective, and I do use the outline and perspective viewport as well. And we'll cover what the outliner panel does in another video. And the last interface panel is the toolbox, right here on the left hand side. The toolbox gives you an option for manually selecting the move tool, rotate, scale, and selecting objects. But most of the time we won't be coming up to the toolbox. We'll be using hotkeys, and we'll cover how to manipulate and work with objects using those hotkeys in another video. You will also see a very important HUD display inside the perspective viewport right here at the top left corner. This is a polycount of all the objects inside your scene and selected objects. This is extremely helpful, and you should have this displayed at all times. If I deselect this object, the left hand side will show you all of the objects inside the scene, and if I select the object, the middle column will show you selected objects only. And the third panel has to do with component mode. And just to briefly show you, if we go to vertex selection and I select just a couple of vertices, this will display the selected component mode of those vertices. So I have 2 vertices selected. If you do not see this polycount display, go to Display, Heads Up Display, and make sure that polycount is enabled. So everything we've covered so far, all of these options are going to be used for game environment modeling. I narrowed down and distilled only those options that we will use for game environment modeling. And from here on out, for the rest of the videos, we will go over and use many of these options and panels of the interface on a case-by-case basis. So as you continue to watch each video, you'll begin to learn what you should be using and how. In the next video, we're going to focus on how to master viewport navigation inside the perspective viewport and in orthographic viewports.